They found my husband's truck at the bottom of Lake Mercy on a Sunday morning. But they did not find my husband. They found my red scarf in the passenger seat. They found my wedding ring in the ashtray. And they found enough blood on the steering wheel to make the sheriff take off his hat before he said my name. That was how my life ended the first time. Not with a funeral. Not with a goodbye. Not even with a body. Just cold lake water, flashing blue lights, and half the town staring at me like I had already been judged. My name is Claire Maddox. I was 30, 8 years old, living in a small town in northern Georgia where everybody knew your business before you did. I taught English at the high school. And until that Sunday morning, I believed my husband, Daniel, loved me. That sounds foolish now, but betrayal always makes the past look stupid. Daniel and I had been married for 14 years. He owned a construction company with his childhood best friend, Troy Bell. I was a high school teacher, careful with money, loyal by nature, and proud of the quiet home we had built. Our dog, Maple, followed me from room to room like I was the only person in the world worth trusting. Maple was smarter than I was. The night before the truck was found, Daniel told me he had to meet a client near the lake. It was close to 10, and rain hit the windows hard. I asked if it could wait until morning. He kissed my forehead and said, "Not this time." Those were the last words I believed from him. At 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of Maple growling. Not barking. Low and serious, from the hallway outside our bedroom. Daniel was not beside me. His side of the bed was cold. I sat up and called his name. No answer. Then I smelled cigarette smoke. Daniel did not smoke. I did not smoke. Nobody had smoked in our house since my father died, and I scrubbed the walls for 3 days to get the yellow stain out of the kitchen paint. I grabbed my robe and walked into the hall. The house was dark, except for a thin bar of light under Daniel's office door. Maple stood in front of it with her ears back. I opened the door. The office was empty. The desk drawer was open. The safe behind the framed photo of our wedding was open too. Inside that safe we kept passports, birth certificates, the house deed, my father's old pocket watch, and an envelope Daniel once told me never to open. I had never opened it. I was the kind of wife who trusted sealed envelopes. The envelope was gone. So was my passport. So was Daniel's. I did not call the police that night. I called Daniel 7 times. It went to voicemail every time. I left one message. I tried to sound calm, but my voice shook. I said, "Daniel, please call me. Maple is acting strange. The safe is open. I am scared." By morning, half the county was standing by the lake. Sheriff Hollis came to my house at 8017. I remember the exact time, because the coffee maker had just clicked off. He stood on my porch with 2 deputies behind him. His face looked tired and careful. He asked if he could come in. Nobody asks that unless they are bringing bad news. He told me a fisherman had seen tire marks on the muddy boat ramp before sunrise. Daniel's truck had been pulled from the water. The driver's side window was broken. There was blood inside. Daniel was missing. Then he asked where I had been the night before. That was the moment I understood I was not only a wife receiving terrible news. I was a suspect. I told him the truth. I had been home alone. I had called Daniel. I had gone into his office. I had seen the safe open. Sheriff Hollis listened with his mouth pressed into a line. Then he asked about my scarf. My red scarf. The one Daniel gave me for Christmas 3 years earlier. The one I wore almost every cold morning. The one I knew had been hanging on the coat rack by the back door. They had found it in his truck, soaked with lake water and spotted with blood. I walked to the coat rack and reached for it, already knowing it would not be there. My hand touched empty wood. That was the first time I felt the trap close. By noon, people were whispering. By Monday, They were staring. By Tuesday, a woman in the grocery store pulled her son away from me like murder could rub off through the air. No body meant no funeral, but the town held a prayer service anyway. Troy Bell stood in front of everyone with tears on his face and said Daniel was like a brother to him. I sat in the front pew with dry eyes and shaking hands. People thought I was cold. They did not know I was afraid if I cried, I would never stop. After the service, Troy came to me. He smelled like rain and expensive cologne. He hugged me too long. His hand pressed hard between my shoulder blades. He whispered, "You should cooperate. It will be easier for everyone." I pulled away and looked at him. There was something in his eyes. Not grief, not worry, warning. That night, I finally opened every file in Daniel's office. I was not a detective. I was a teacher. My greatest professional skill was making teenagers care about Shakespeare before lunch. But fear can teach a person quickly. I searched drawers. I checked folders. I turned his desk upside down. I found invoices, permits, receipts, loan documents, and a second cell phone taped under the bottom drawer. That phone changed everything. It was dead when I found it. I plugged it in and waited on the floor beside the outlet like it was a bomb. When the screen lit up, it asked for a passcode. I tried Daniel's birthday. Wrong, our anniversary. Wrong, my birthday. Wrong. Then I tried a date I hated myself for remembering. July 19, the day Daniel's old girlfriend, Vanessa, had moved back to town. The phone opened. Inside were messages. Not a few messages. Hundreds. Daniel and Vanessa. And Troy, Daniel and someone saved only as M. The messages with Vanessa were exactly what you think. Sweet lies. Late-night pictures. Plans. Complaints about me. Daniel called me careful, simple, and easy to control. I remember reading that phrase twice. Easy to control. Something inside me went quiet. The messages with Troy were worse. They talked about money, insurance, company debt, a property transfer I did not recognize, and one message from Troy sent 3 days before Daniel vanished. It said, "After Saturday, she takes the fall or we all go down." My hands went numb. Then I opened the thread from M. There were only 7 messages. The last one had been sent at 1:46 in the morning, less than 30 minutes before I woke up to Maple growling. It said, "She is asleep. Back door is open. Take the scarf." I stopped breathing. Someone had been inside my house that night. Someone had watched me sleep. And whoever M was, they had helped Daniel disappear. Part Tabo. Tichwawamanayan Tichirayan Q8. I should have taken the phone straight to Sheriff Hollis. I know that. A good person would have trusted the law right away. But I had already watched the sheriff look at me like my grief was evidence. I had already seen my name floating around town like smoke. And if Daniel and Troy had planned this, then I had no idea who else they had touched with money, favors, or secrets. So I did something I had never done before. I lied. When Sheriff Hollis came back with more questions, I told him I had found nothing unusual in Daniel's office. I let him search the house. I let him take Daniel's laptop. I let him ask me about our marriage, our arguments, our finances, and whether I had ever wished my husband was dead. I said no. That part was still true. Back then, I did not want Daniel dead. I wanted him alive long enough to answer me. For 3 days, I barely slept. I kept the second phone wrapped in a towel inside a coffee tin in the pantry. Every time Maple barked, I grabbed a kitchen knife. Every car that slowed outside made my heart kick against my ribs. On the 4th night, someone broke into my car. They did not steal anything. They opened the glove compartment and left one thing on the driver's seat: a photograph. It showed me sleeping in my bed. The picture had been taken from the doorway of my bedroom. Across the bottom, written in black marker, were 6 words: "Stop digging or join him." I stood in the driveway under the porch light, holding that photograph with both hands, and for one clear second, I almost gave up. Almost. Then Maple pressed against my leg and growled toward the street. A dark sedan sat at the corner with its lights off. I could not see the driver, but I saw the flash of a green coat sleeve when the car pulled away. The next morning, I called my older brother, Eli. Eli lived in Tennessee and fixed old motorcycles for a living. We had not been close for years, but when I said, "I think Daniel is alive," he did not ask if I was sure. He said, "Lock your doors. I will be there by dark." He arrived with a duffel bag, 2 gas station coffees, and a look in his eyes I remembered from childhood. When boys on our street threw rocks at my bicycle, and he came outside with a baseball bat. I showed him the phone. I showed him the messages. I showed him the photograph from my car. He read everything in silence. Then he said, "Claire, this is not a missing person case. This is a frame job." Hearing someone else say it made my knees weak. Eli wanted to go to the police. I wanted proof first. Real proof. Proof that could not disappear. Proof that would survive if the sheriff had already decided I was guilty. So we started with the easiest question. Who was M? The second phone had no full names, but it had call logs. One number appeared again and again, near the time Daniel vanished. Eli used an online search service and found the number belonged to a prepaid phone bought at a gas station 20 miles away. That did not help, but one of the messages from M mentioned a place. Blue Lantern, 9 p.m. back table. The Blue Lantern was a bar outside town near the highway with neon beer signs, sticky floors, and too many men watching the door. I went the next night. Eli hated the idea, so he came too. He sat in his truck across the road while I walked inside wearing jeans, boots, and a baseball cap. The bar smelled like fried food and bad decisions. I sat near the back. My hands were cold. Every time the door opened, I looked up. At 9:12, Vanessa walked in. I had not seen her up close in years. She was still beautiful in a sharp. Dark hair. Red lipstick. Heels too high for a cracked parking lot. And over one arm, she carried a green coat. My stomach turned. She sat at the back table and ordered whiskey. 5 minutes later, Troy arrived. They did not kiss. They did not hug. They sat across from each other like business partners. I slid deeper into the shadow of my booth and turned my phone recorder on. The jukebox was loud, but I caught enough. Vanessa said Daniel was getting nervous. Troy said Daniel needed to stay gone. Vanessa said, "What about Claire?" And Troy said, "Claire is breaking. Give it a week." My fingers tightened around my glass so hard I thought it might crack. Then Vanessa said something that made the room tilt. She said, "And Marianne." Troy leaned forward. He said, "Keep your voice down." Marianne, my best friend. No. My mind rejected it before my heart could understand it. Marianne Keller had stood beside me at my wedding. She had held my hand when my mother died. She had a key to my house because she fed Maple when I traveled. She knew where my scarf hung. She knew where I slept. She knew how to move through my house in the dark. I left the bar before I screamed. Outside. I made it behind the building before I threw up in the gravel. Eli found me there, shaking. I told him one word. Marianne. His face changed. Betrayal by a husband is a knife. Betrayal by a best friend is the hand that holds you still while the knife goes in. We followed Troy when he left the bar. Eli drove with the headlights off for half a mile until Troy turned onto an old service road that led toward the abandoned paper mill. The mill had been closed since I was a teenager. It sat near the river, all broken windows and rusted fences, with weeds growing through the concrete. Troy parked behind the main building. A minute later, another car pulled up. Marianne got out. Even from a distance, I knew the way she moved. She carried a small duffel bag. Then a third figure came out of the shadows. Daniel, my husband, alive. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I had imagined seeing him alive 1,000 times, but the real moment was silent, cold, empty. He wore a black hoodie and a baseball cap, but it was him. Daniel took the duffel bag from Marianne and kissed her on the cheek. Not Vanessa. Marianne. That was the twist. Vanessa was not the woman he loved. She was the distraction. The town would believe Daniel ran off with his old flame, or that I killed him out of jealousy. Either story helped them. But Marianne was the one inside my house. My best friend was the ghost at my bedroom door. I lifted my phone and recorded through the windshield. My hands shook, but I kept the camera steady enough. Daniel opened the duffel bag. Inside were stacks of cash, passports, and a handgun wrapped in a towel. Troy said something I could not hear. Daniel laughed. That laugh hurt more than the kiss, because I knew that laugh. I had heard it in our kitchen, at our dining table, in our bed. I had built a marriage around a sound that now made me feel sick. Then Marianne turned her head toward the road. For one awful second, I thought she saw us. Ely put the truck in reverse and rolled backward without turning on the lights. We got out of there alive. But now we knew the truth. Daniel was alive. Troy was helping him. Marianne was helping him. And somewhere inside their plan, I was supposed to lose everything. Maybe my freedom. Maybe my life. Partitari. Th file uandar the fellowar. We did not sleep that night. Ely wanted to drive me straight out of town. But I knew something he did not. Daniel had planned too carefully to leave only one trap. If I ran, I would look guilty. If I stayed, I might die. So I chose a third option. I became the woman Daniel always thought I was too soft to be. The next morning, I called Marianne. My voice sounded normal. That was the frightening part. I told her I needed her. I said I was falling apart. I asked if she could come over after work. There was a pause. Then she said, "Of course, honey." Honey. I almost laughed. Before she arrived, Ely set up 2 small security cameras and backed up every piece of evidence to 3 different places. He said, "Dead people need insurance too." When Marianne came over, she wore a soft blue sweater and brought soup. Soup. My best friend had helped frame me for murder and still remembered I liked extra crackers. She hugged me in the doorway, and I let her. Her arms felt the same. That was the cruelest thing. Evil does not always feel like evil. Sometimes it smells like familiar perfume and says your name gently. We sat in the living room. Maple would not go near her. Marianne noticed. She forced a smile and said, "Maple must be upset." I said, "She has been growling a lot lately." Marianne looked at me too quickly. I let the silence stretch. Then I started crying. Real crying. Sitting across from her broke something open in me. I cried for the woman I thought she was. Marianne moved beside me on the couch and rubbed my back. She said, "You need rest." I said, "I know." She said, "Maybe you should take something to sleep." There it was. A small sentence. Soft. Helpful. A door opening. I asked what she meant. She said she had pills left from her anxiety prescription. Just something mild. Something to help me stop thinking for one night. I told her maybe tomorrow. Her jaw tightened. Only a little. But I saw it. After she left, Ely checked the soup. I wish I could tell you he was being paranoid. He was not. The soup contained crushed sleeping pills. Enough to knock me out hard. Maybe they only planned to search the house again. Maybe they planned something worse. I never got the chance to ask. Because that same night, I found the file under the floor. It happened because of Maple. She kept scratching at the rug in Daniel's office. I thought she was nervous until she refused to stop. Ely moved the rug and found one floorboard slightly raised near the wall. Under it was a waterproof envelope. Inside were copies of documents, a flash drive, and a letter addressed to me in Daniel's handwriting. For one wild second, I thought it was a confession. It was not a confession. It was a script. The letter was written to sound like me, It said I was sorry. It said Daniel had been cruel. It said I could not live with what I had done. It said the lake was calling him back, and maybe it was calling me too. It was my suicide note. Daniel had written my death before I even knew I was in danger. I sat on the floor with that paper in my lap, and I felt something inside me harden into a shape I did not recognize. Eli swore under his breath. But I did not swear. I did not cry. I did not shake. I read the note again, slowly. Daniel had made one mistake. He thought I would break quietly. The flash drive held the rest of the story. Daniel and Troy's company was drowning in debt. They had taken deposits from clients and used the money to pay old loans. They had bribed an inspector and cut corners on unsafe lake houses. Daniel had also taken out a large life insurance policy 18 months earlier. On me, not on himself. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. The plan became clear. First, Daniel disappeared and made the town suspect me. Then the pressure, the threats, and the fake evidence would push me toward despair. If that did not work, they would help it happen. My death would look like guilt. My so-called suicide note would close the story. Daniel would reappear later under a new name, or never reappear at all. Troy would collect hidden money. Marianne would leave with Daniel. Vanessa would be blamed as the affair that started everything. It was ugly. It was clever. It was almost perfect. Almost. Because Daniel forgot I had spent 15 years teaching stories. And every story has a turning point. Mine came on Thursday at 6:30 in the morning. When I walked into the sheriff's office with Ely, a lawyer from Atlanta, and enough copies of evidence to make every deputy in the room stop talking. The lawyer's name was Patricia Sloan. She was small, gray-haired, and terrifying. Eli had found her through a friend. She listened to my story once and said, "Mrs. Maddox, your husband has made a very serious mistake." I liked her immediately. We did not give everything to Sheriff Hollis at first. Patricia gave him enough to force action and held back enough to protect me. The sheriff watched the mill video twice. The first time, his face went pale. The second time, he asked me why I had not brought it sooner. Patricia answered before I could. She said, "Because your department treated a threatened woman like a murderer." Nobody spoke after that. By noon, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was involved, but Daniel had vanished again before anyone reached the mill. Troy lawyered up. Vanessa cried and claimed she had only passed messages for money. Marianne disappeared. My best friend ran. For 2 days. The town changed its mind about me so fast, it almost made me dizzy. People who had whispered now waved. People who avoided me now brought casseroles. I threw most of them away. Forgiveness is holy. But I was not feeling holy yet. On Saturday night, I received a text from an unknown number. One sentence. "Come alone, or Eli dies." Below it was a picture of Eli sitting in his truck outside my house. The picture had been taken from the woods across the road. My hands went cold. Then a second message came. "Old Carter Bridge, midnight. Bring the phone." I called Patricia. Then I called Sheriff Hollis. Then I did exactly what Daniel expected me to do. I went to the bridge. But I did not go alone. Parfo URT Bredigat Medini Old Carter Bridge had been closed for 10 years. It crossed a narrow part of the river where fog gathered thick at night. At midnight, the bridge looked like the end of the world. I parked my car near the barrier and stepped out with the second phone in my coat pocket. A recording device was taped under my sweater. Another was inside my boot. Deputies waited half a mile away with their lights off. GBI agents were hidden in the trees. Ely was safe at the sheriff's office, furious but safe. Still, when I saw Daniel standing in the fog, my fear felt real. He stepped from the shadows like a ghost who had gotten tired of haunting and decided to speak. He looked at me and smiled, not warmly, not sadly, Like I was a problem he could still solve. He said, "You always were stubborn." I kept my voice steady. I said, "You always were predictable." His smile disappeared. That small victory tasted better than I expected. Daniel told me to hand over the phone. I asked where Marianne was. He said, "Gone." I asked if that meant safe or dead. He took one step closer. He said I should worry about myself. The fog moved around us. Water rushed below the bridge. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called once and then went silent. Daniel started talking. That was his weakness. It had always been his weakness. Daniel could lie for hours as long as he had an audience. He told me I had made him feel small. He said the company failed because clients were greedy, banks were cruel, and everyone expected him to be perfect. He blamed everyone. Then he blamed me. He said my father's house should have been sold years ago. He said my teacher salary was embarrassing. He said I looked at him like I knew he was failing. I almost answered. I almost defended myself. Then I remembered Patricia's warning. Let him talk. So I asked one question. Why Marianne? His face changed. For the first time, he looked almost human. He said Marianne listened. Marianne understood. Marianne was not always correcting him with silence. 14 years of marriage, and he had turned my quiet into an insult. I asked if she knew he planned to kill me. Daniel snapped, "Nobody was going to kill you if you behaved." There it was. The first confession. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I asked what behaving meant. He said, taking the pills, writing the note, letting people believe what they needed to believe. The second confession. I felt the recorder against my skin like a tiny warm flame. Then headlights appeared behind him. A car rolled onto the far side of the bridge. Marianne got out. She carried a manila envelope in one hand. Daniel turned on her, furious. He said, "I told you to stay away." Marianne looked at me, and for a moment I saw my friend. Not the woman who drugged my soup. My friend. Broken, terrified, and too late. She said, "Claire, I am sorry." Those words did not heal anything, but they opened the door to the truth. Marianne told Daniel she was done. She said she had kept copies. She said she would tell them everything. She said Vanessa had already talked. Daniel lunged toward her. That was when the lights came on. Red and blue flashed through the fog. Agents came from both sides. Deputies shouted. Daniel froze. For one stupid second, he looked surprised, as if the world had betrayed him by not following his script. He reached into his coat. I do not remember deciding to move. I only remember running toward Marianne and knocking her sideways as a gunshot cracked across the bridge. The bullet hit the metal rail with a scream of sparks. Then Daniel was on the ground, tackled by 2 agents, his face pressed against wet wood. He shouted my name, not because he loved me, because he still thought my name belonged to him. They arrested Daniel that night. They arrested Troy before sunrise. Vanessa took a deal. Marianne confessed to entering my house, drugging the soup, stealing my scarf, and helping Daniel plant evidence. She claimed she did not know about the suicide note until later. Maybe that was true. Maybe it was another lie. I stopped needing to know every corner of her soul. Some houses are too burned to search. The trial took 11 months. Reporters called it the Lake Mercy murder. That wasn't. Then the fake death plot. Then the Maddox conspiracy. I sat through every day of court. I watched Daniel in a suit he did not deserve. I watched Troy avoid my eyes. I watched Marianne cry into tissues. And I told the truth. Slowly. Clearly. Without shaking. The prosecutor played the bridge recording. The courtroom went silent when Daniel's voice said nobody was going to kill me if I behaved. Daniel's lawyer tried to make me seem unstable. He asked if I had been angry about Vanessa. He asked if I had followed my husband. He asked if I had hidden evidence. He asked if I enjoyed seeing Daniel arrested. I said no to most of it. But on the last question, I paused. Then I said, I enjoyed surviving. That answer made the judge look down to hide his face. In the end, Daniel was convicted of conspiracy, insurance fraud, evidence tampering, assault, and attempted murder. Troy was convicted too. Vanessa served less time because she cooperated. Marianne received a sentence that felt both too long for the friend I remembered and too short for the enemy she became. Justice is not a clean thing. It does not wash fear out of memory, but justice does something revenge cannot do. It puts the truth somewhere public, where the people who lied cannot lock it away again. Still, I had one piece of revenge left. Not illegal, not violent, just final. Daniel had wanted my father's house sold. He had hated that house. He said it was old, drafty, and worth more as land than as memory. My father built it with his own hands. He planted the oak tree in the front yard the week I was born. Daniel wanted it gone because the land sat near the lake, and rich people wanted views. After the trial, I found out he and Troy had already drawn plans for it. They were going to tear down my father's house and build 3 luxury rentals. So I did the thing Daniel would have hated most. I turned it into a shelter. Not a big one, not fancy. A quiet place for women who needed to leave quickly and safely. Patricia helped with the legal side. Ely fixed the roof. My students painted the porch. We named it the Red Scarf House. At first, I hated that name. The scarf had been used to frame me. But then a woman arrived one rainy Tuesday with 2 children. 1 suitcase and a bruise hidden under makeup. I gave her tea, clean sheets, and the room with the morning sun. The next day, she saw the red scarf framed on the wall near the front door. Under it, Patricia had placed a small brass plaque. It said, "What was used against you can lead you home." The woman read it and started crying. That was when I stopped hating the name. Part T last. Litar 2 years passed before I saw Daniel again. Not in person. On paper. A letter arrived from the state prison. His handwriting on the envelope made my stomach tighten. Ely told me to burn it. Patricia told me to give it to her unopened. But that night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened it. Daniel wrote 3 pages. He said prison had changed him. He said he was sorry for the pain his mistakes had caused. He never said crimes. He said mistakes. He never said he tried to kill me. Men like Daniel do not confess. They edit. At the end, he asked for one thing. He wanted me to visit. He said he needed closure. I laughed then. Not because it was funny. Because after everything, he still believed my life was a room he could walk into when he needed something. I did not visit. Instead, I wrote 1 letter back. It took me 3 weeks because I wanted to say it without poison. Poison had already taken enough from me. I wrote to Daniel, "You do not need closure from me. You need honesty from yourself. I survived what you planned. I rebuilt what you tried to steal. I turned the house you wanted to destroy into a place where frightened women learn the sound of their own strength. That is the only answer I owe you. Claire." I mailed it without a return address. Then I walked home under the oak tree my father planted. The air smelled like cut grass and summer rain. Maple moved slowly beside me now, gray around the face but still loyal. That evening, a young woman named Lacey arrived at the Red Scarf House with a baby on her hip. She was 22 and trying not to cry. I carried her bag upstairs and showed her the room with the quilt my mother made. She asked me if it ever gets better. I knew what she meant. Does fear get smaller? Does betrayal stop echoing? I sat beside her on the bed. I told her the truth. I said, it does not get better all at once. It gets better in pieces. 1 locked door. 1 full night of sleep. 1 meal you can taste again. 1 morning when you realize you did not check the window first. 1 day when your own laugh surprises you. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it, but did not know how. I understood that look. So I told her about the lake. Not every detail. Not the whole ugly story. Just enough. I told her there was a time when someone I loved built a lie around me. I told her the truth took longer than I wanted, cost more than I expected, and still came. Then I said, "You are not what he did to you." She cried then. So did I. Sometimes healing is not a grand victory. Sometimes it is two women crying quietly while a baby sleeps between them. That night, after everyone was settled, I walked down to Lake Mercy alone. I had not gone there by myself since the truck was found. The moon was high. The water was calm. Across the lake, the windows of expensive houses glowed like small, distant fires. I stood at the old boat ramp where Daniel's truck had gone in. For a long time, I hated that place. But standing there 2 years later, I realized the lake had not taken my life. It had given it back. Not gently, not kindly, but completely. Because if Daniel had not staged his death, I might have spent 20 more years married to a man who saw my love as a tool. The lake exposed him. The lake exposed all of them. And then it left me standing. I took the wedding ring they had found in the truck from my pocket. The police returned it after the trial. It had once meant forever. Then it became evidence. After that, it was just a small circle of gold with no place to belong. I held it up in the moonlight. Then I threw it as far as I could. It disappeared without a sound. The lake swallowed it like it had been waiting. I stood there until the wind dried my face. Then I went home. The red scarf house was quiet when I returned. Maple slept near the front door. A night, light glowed in the hallway. I locked the door. Not because I was afraid. Because I was protecting something worth keeping. Before bed, I stood in front of the framed red scarf. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who trusted too easily and mistook silence for safety. I do not hate her anymore. But I am not her now. Now I know love without respect is a locked room. Now I know betrayal does not always arrive shouting. Sometimes it uses your house key. And now I know revenge is not always watching your enemy fall. Sometimes revenge is building a door he can never walk through again. Daniel wanted me broken, buried under his story. Remembered as a jealous wife who could not survive the truth. Instead, I became the woman who survived his lie, opened her doors to others, and turned the evidence against me into a warning light for anyone trying to find their way out of the dark. So when people ask me what happened at Lake Mercy, I do not start with Daniel anymore. I start with the house. I start with the women. I start with the red scarf hanging by the door, and I end with this. The night my husband tried to erase me was the night I finally learned how to write my own name in permanent ink.